I'm Mark Gagan and you're listening to the Voice of Insurance podcast, produced in association with Advantage Go. Release your underwriters to underwrite with Advantage Go's underwriting platform. Today's guest carries out an incredibly important role representing the whole London market in the UK's corridors of power. That means looking out for a market that wrote over $100 billion in core gross written premium and controlled just under $160 billion in all in 2022, increasing its global market share to over 8%. That also means representing a market that now employs some 60,000 people and produces 2% of UK GDP and 8.5% of London's GDP. Caroline Wagstaff, CEO of the London Market Group, was born to do a job like this. She's passionate and very difficult to say no to. But she's also a great communicator and is very good at reading a room and a collective mood. The London Market Group, or the LMG, allows Lloyd's, Liiba, the IUA and the LMA to speak with one voice on broad London market-related topics. And in this episode we dissect the LMG's latest London Matters report and catch up with what is now top of the LMG's busy agenda. The report is an essential companion to this episode and there will be a link to it in the podcast notes. I highly recommend a read. It isn't long, and it's packed full of very useful facts about the London market's place in the global risk ecosystem and its direction of travel. Caroline is on excellent form in this discussion, and the podcast is crackling with energy. I, for one, am extremely glad that we've been able to get someone of her calibre to represent us as an industry. London has been doing relatively well of late, but listening back to this recording, it's clear that there is zero complacency at the LMG. Caroline is not going to rest until the UK government and its regulators are working harder to make it do even better. Enjoy the podcast. Caroline, welcome back to the Voice of Insurance.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be back again.
It's really good to have you back on the show, and we've got a really good reason. We've got lots to talk about. LMG's published the latest version of its long-running report on the London market and its place in the world, London Matters. Run us through the headlines.
So this is the 10th year that we've been doing London Matters. The first publication was in 2014 under the leadership of Steve Hearn and Chris Croft. And I think this is a really great opportunity to actually look at a real body of data. When we did it in 2014, we'd never done it before. It was a genuine revelation to people, I think, how many people the market employed, what our market share was, what our contribution to the UK economy was. And so it's great to come back and revisit that data here in 2024. And I think the headlines are broadly all very positive. It's been great to go through this process with our board, with other stakeholders in the market, and to hear that reflected in the story they're telling back to us. So what we're seeing is tremendous growth in gross written premium. That is not just pricing uplift. A rising tide carries all ships. So the whole global market sees that. But we're also seeing an increase in our market share. And that's really important because that shows that London is gaining market share from other places, that businesses coming to London that didn't come before.
And also, it's good to have an increase in market share when the market is palpably good, rather than an increase in market share when the market's bad.
When people slightly raise their eyebrows and say, what is that business that's still coming to London? So I think those are really good stories. The employment numbers, having had a bit of a COVID dip, we're now seeing a real bounce.
We're in record numbers now, aren't we?
We are absolutely in record numbers. And we had a great debate around the boardroom table about what is that telling us? What are those jobs? And I don't think we know enough about that. And maybe that's something we should ask some more questions on. What are the sorts of jobs that we're generating? But what that leads to, of course, is it leads to a real uplift in our GDP contribution. So the fact is that we contribute nearly a third of the city's GDP now. And I always say, when I talk to the City of London Corporation, as I do quite a lot, saying specialty insurance, we're really important, you know. We're still one of the only financial services that's physically really still here in the city. So many others have gone to Canary Wharf, they've gone to Mayfair, they may be coming back. But insurance, we're still in EC3, we're still firmly in the City of London.
Yeah, and paying our elevated business rates here.
Exactly. As well. And I think that's really important for the market. The fact that we are still an ecosystem. I always say to people, we're a village, we're an insurance village, and it's great that we're physically still here.
Absolutely. Well, we're in a sublet out of Lloyd's of London, which is rather wonderful. And I wandered through the market today to get here, and it's great to see all the people that you write about. Not always so great if you haven't written something nice about them. But it is, yeah, but you can't really beat wandering up and down Lime Street for getting a feel. It's one of the only places in the world you can wander up and down Front Street and get a similar feeling sometimes. That's in Hamilton, Bermuda. But otherwise, those are probably the only two places in the world where you could get that feeling that something to do with insurance is happening around here.
It's the serendipitous meetings, I think, is a great phrase used by Chris Croft. And I think that's so important. You bump into people and you have the conversation and things happen as a result of it.
Yes, with me, it was what young reporters at The Insider used to call the sandwich story. On a quiet day, I would go out to get my lunch. I wasn't going for a fancy lunch with some CEO. I was just paid for your own lunch, little sandwich shop around the corner. More often than not, I'd bump into someone in the sandwich shop and we'd be chatting about somebody. It wouldn't be a very high value story, but it would be, did you know that so-and-so has just left? And I would just check that was news, and there you go.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this. The original reason why the London Market Group put together this report 10 years ago, why Steve Hearn, I think I was there when he almost made a pitch for reviving the London Market Group. The London Market Group had already existed, but it hadn't existed in this form, more of a lobby group type form. And his pitch was that people over there in Westminster, people over there in power don't really know who we are. They don't really know how important we are. And we need to come together and talk with one voice on the things that we can talk about. And you're right to say that first report really gave the London market a bit of heft. Suddenly the city ministers suddenly thought, well, goodness me, here's a really big constituency that I didn't necessarily know was there. And now they want to come and have a meeting with me and ask me what I can do to help them. Now, we've increased our heft and we've increased our relative heft within London vis-a-vis other financial services in London. So what are you going to use that heft for now that it's 10 years, every politician knows who we are now?
I think that's right. And absolutely 10 years ago, people, they would know of Lloyd's of London. They'd know about that as a home of specialist risk and Betty Grable's legs and satellites, as I always used to say. But that dates me terribly. It's got to be Dua Lipa now, someone much more trendy. But the point is that data gave us the ability to go and knock on government's door and have a conversation about what we wanted. And I've been really lucky. I've inherited a great body of work done by my predecessors in building those relationships. And you're right. I don't think there is anybody in Treasury who doesn't know what the London market is now. I don't think there's people in Shadow Treasury who don't know what the London market is now. And we had great conversations. Now, you and I are recording this the day after the general election was called, which of course changes the entire political landscape and clears my diary quite neatly, actually, for the next 6 weeks. But we will absolutely be having a plan about what we do with this new set of data. So just in tactical terms, I personally emailed, I think, 35 parliamentarians on Monday with the report and our plan for the future and what it is we need government to do to support the London market to really reinforce our position as the global centre of risk transfer. I think there are two things we really need to happen. The first is, and most of this is evolution, not revolution. We've been talking about a number of these things. We need a regulatory environment which allows the market to thrive. And that really is all about proportionality. It means that the regulators recognise that we're a wholesale market, not a retail market. That means our policyholders are different and maybe don't need the same levels of protection as a retail consumer.
Yes, you know you have a customer in Kentucky, but you don't necessarily have to know every customer in Kentucky and prove to regulators in London that you know them.
And the policyholder, by the way, is in Kentucky. The job of the Financial Conduct Authority is to look after policyholders in the UK. So the fact that so much of our business is international is really important. The second about proportionality is the risks that we write. You know, what are the types of risks that we're writing and what risk do they pose systemically to the system? So if you're talking about something like a captive insurance company, and as you know, we've been lobbying for the introduction of a UK captive regime, then this is not a new risk transfer product. This has been used for 30 years in many markets. It doesn't need to be treated like some new crypto asset, which, to be frank, none of us really understand. So I think we need more proportionality in understanding what I call new risks or new solutions to those that are well established, but just not in the UK.
Well, what about just sort of good old efficiency, just being able to turn around approvals and things quicker and being well staffed and that kind of thing?
Absolutely. I call that the business as usual model. We need them to be doing their day job as efficiently and as effectively as possible, because those are the things that when people make choices about where they bring business, where they bring capital and where they bring people, those are really important parts of that decision-making process. And
we've changed regulation, the regulation of regulation, shall we say. These regulators in the UK, the conduct regulator, the FCA, and the prudential regulator, the PRA, have to have a secondary view to the competitive position of the market that they're regulating these days. It's early days, but any positive signs that that has made a difference to their mindset?
Sorry to interrupt in mid-flow, but this is just a reminder that you could be advertising right here, right now. and getting your message directly into the ear of key decision makers in the insurance industry. And you'll be doing it while they're absolutely in listening mode. The podcast is the medium of the future, and so is audio advertising. Contact me on mark@thevoiceofinsurance.com, and I'll do everything I can to get you started.
We've had really constructive discussions with both sets of regulators in different ways on different aspects about this. So we've had ongoing discussions with the FCA about what is a consumer, because at the moment the word consumer covers a whole lot of different categories of people and businesses. Not all consumers are equal, as George Orwell might have said. So that's one discussion. We've had conversations about where exactly the waterline is in terms of policyholders with the FCA. Many of ours are international. We're having ongoing discussions about ILS and captives in terms of the introduction of new risk transfer tools or improving the systems we've got. So all of that is great. As you say, it's very early days, but the government has put in place metrics to measure some of, particularly the things that the regulators can really control.
Yes, because I remember when we last spoke, you wanted to make sure that they had some kind of measure. That they couldn't just have this vague notion that they're having an eye to competitiveness. Have you got some metrics now that they'll have to
Yes, so the Treasury,
hit?
we weighed in on the debate. We had produced a report called Metrics for Success, where we suggested a lot of metrics. The Treasury actually adopted quite a lot of those. And the thing about those is, they're, to your point about, they're things like the approvals. They're the real business as usual stuff, which the regulators really can control. I mean, growth is a really big thing to say, oh, I did this and the economy grew by that. I mean, that's quite a long stretch. And I fully understand why the regulators have concerns about their ability, because tax is important and immigration is important and lots of other things. But that business as usual stuff, they can absolutely control, and we should be able to see that it's getting better and more efficient.
Because we're funding it.
They are funded by the industry.
I want to quickly pick up about captives. That was a big ask in the report. Captives UK. Lloyd's has already got a captive scheme, but it's not currently being used, but it's sort of in the process of being revived, if I'm to believe all the different news reports. What's behind that UK domiciled captives idea?
So the debate is really around choice. If you look at the growth of the captive market, it has been really significant. And risk managers are basically saying, we have a whole range of tools we can use in terms of risk retention or risk transfer or risk mitigation. And they want the greatest amount of choice about what tools they use and where they use them. And the UK is the global centre of risk transfer. So it just seems logical that we should be offering our clients all the tools in the toolkit. So why wouldn't we want the ability to have a UK captive regime? And the change from Solvency II to Solvency UK gives us an opportunity to do that in a way that could make us genuinely very competitive. And we could create a regulatory framework that would be at least as, we hope, as responsive and good as other domiciles. And for me, it's about being able to give people the choice. And I've been really struck by how much support we've had for that. So the government announced last autumn they would run a consultation on this after we've been in conversation with them for quite a long time. I mean, they did have the Financial Services Markets Act and Solvency II, so I get that they've had a lot on their dance card. And since that announcement, I've been really surprised by the amount of communication I've had from captive managers, risk managers, all sorts of people in that ecosystem saying, yeah, we think this is a really interesting idea. And the irony is how many government-owned or arm's length bodies have captives, which of course are offshore by definition. So we sort of said, well, look, there's some low-hanging fruit here, guys. You could onshore some of this. And I think it would make for a really interesting conversation. And the brokers have been really supportive. And they're the people who are advising on where people should be looking. So it's all about choice.
Because obviously, when you talk to some risk managers, well, of course, I actually want that capital to be offshore for particular reasons. So
yeah.
I want it to be in another jurisdiction away from not very nice plaintiff lawyers in certain jurisdictions, shall we say. Exactly.
But equally, I mean, I've talked to a lot of captive managers who've been incredibly helpful in helping us formulate our thinking around this. And one of them said to me, and they were a captive manager for a mid-sized professional services firm here in the UK. So all their businesses in the UK, they pay all their tax in the UK. Their captive is in Bermuda. And they were like, actually, it'd be so much better if we could have it here in the UK. And it would be in the same place as all our other operations.
We didn't have to take a long flight to have a
And we didn't
meeting.
have to take a long flight. Well, you imagine what happened in COVID when people had to go offshore to take their underwriting decisions and they couldn't actually get on a plane and go anywhere. I mean, that was quite a challenge. France has introduced a captive regime.
Yep.
And what's been really interesting from their experience, I was chatting to their captive association, is they've been really surprised by the number of applicants they've got in the pipeline from people who've never had a captive before. So mid-sized firms who would never have considered the faff of having one offshore, but have said, if there's an onshore option that's much easier for us to manage as a medium-sized company, that's a great risk transfer tool, and we'd love to be able to have part of it. So
it'd be convenient because I'm going to visit my broker anyway, and my broker's probably going to manage the captive for me even while I'm at it.
Exactly.
It can all be very easily done.
There's onshoring of existing captives, there's possibly people starting new captives, and then there's this possibly a whole new market of people who'd never thought of a captive before who might be interested in the UK.
And of course, then you get the reinsurance of those captives, could be located in London as well.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.
We might as well talk about politics. Yes, UK's going to have a new government on July the 5th. And obviously, if we believe opinion polls, we might have a different flavour government. The shadow government might become the new government and the current government might become the shadow government. I think you've been testing the waters with some of the shadows. In the shadows. You've been in the shadows, Caroline. Anything to report there is that they seem to have been making some favourable noises, which is very encouraging.
I think that's true. So we've had really good discussions with the Shadow Treasury team. Well, certainly I have in the 3 years I've been in this role. And the interesting thing is, I think, is we're seeing a lot of continuity in the overarching direction of travel around regulatory accountability, transparency and measurement. So the Shadow Labour team were very supportive of our asks through the Financial Services and Markets Bill to act. And as part of their financial services review, have definitely reinforced that there will be continuity in what the government have set up in terms of that accountability and metrics and so forth. The other thing they've talked about, which we're really supportive of and supports a lot of what we've been talking about, is this idea of having, we describe it as a welcome mat, which is my short form for how do you make people who want to come and invest in the UK financial services, particularly specialty insurance, feel welcomed and loved. Many of our competitor markets have a set of people who go and put their arm around the incoming business. They don't lower the hurdle for them, but they definitely help them over the hurdles.
I was very surprised. I was hosting an event in New York and I met the regulator from Singapore there. Happened to be at the same cocktail party looking for new people to invite to Singapore.
Absolutely. They have an office in London, apparently. And we definitely don't do, and I'm not the only voice saying this, but we definitely don't do a good job as UK PLC in doing that for our incoming investors. You might get number 10 deploying somebody if you're going to build a giga battery plant in the northeast, but you definitely don't get it if you're setting up a new specialty insurance company. But there's more.
We've had some things perhaps with the InsurTech side of things. We've had the Connecticut Gateway, UK. We've had some things.
There are some.
Perhaps in this post-Brexit environment, we've had more.
It's not
more
really
focus.
very joined up.
Yeah.
And there isn't a single door you can go and knock on. You kind of arrive and think, oh, do I go to Department of Business and Trade?
Another thing for you to ask for, you could organise them.
Yeah.
Caroline.
Well, problem is financial services sits in Treasury, but DBT tends to be the place where that sort of thing happens. So we are saying...
DBT?
Department for Business and Trade, sorry, which might be called something else.
They do tend to change the name of that one.
I get very confused. So having a more joined up approach, having a single front door, having this concierge service. There was a Harrington review, which I would recommend everybody reading. It was incredibly pithy, but it had some great examples. So did you know that if you were thinking, Mark, I think I'm going to open an insurance company in Paris, and you talk to the French government, you start getting WhatsApp messages from President Macron and the Élysée Palace. You know, it's just that little thing that makes people feel rather loved and wanted. So other people are doing it. There's lots we can learn. I always say we don't have to invent this wheel ourselves. We just have to look over our horizons and see what other people are doing and do it too.
Well, let's talk about the report itself a little bit more. So that big headline is London's share of global commercial and reinsurance has increased. About 8.3%.
Yes.
Is that the right words? I don't want to go into too many numbers because we'll misquote them, we'll forget them. So we're going to attach a link to the report. We don't want to deter
anyone from reading the report.
Yes, you must read the report. We'll put all the links to that, obviously, in the notes of the podcast. You should definitely read the report first because it's also a really quick read. It doesn't take very long to read through. It's got all the numbers you need. Mostly really good news. Reinsurance is one of the ones, it's not going down, but it's stagnating. It's not been growing. Anything behind that?
I think the rationale behind why the reinsurance market has been, as you say, a bit stagnant has been pretty well rehearsed by a number of reporters and other commentators across the market. It appears to be there's issues around line size, there's issues around whether London can write the line sizes required. Some of the reinsurance market leaders are no longer in the market. It's about the structure as much as it is about the place. And people say to me, should you be worrying about that as the LMG? And I'm sort of, well, I think markets evolve and I think they change. And I'm not sure it's bad news. And it's really up to businesses as to whether they want to put that capital in London or whether they want to keep it in Bermuda.
It's still a $37 billion market.
It's still a big chunk. You might argue whether that's pure reinsurance or whether it's direct and facultative and all sorts of debates about what's in there. I think for me, the two really interesting numbers is there's a number in our report where we talk about this premium which is controlled in London but not placed in London. And that's a broke number that the brokers give us. And I always refer to that as a sort of expertise premium. And a lot of that's reinsurance. People come to London for the expertise, for the placement design, for the brains of the operation, and then they'll place it somewhere else. And I think that says a lot about the London ecosystem, that we're not just about capital, we are also about the expertise and the people. And the second thing, which I think has always been true in London, but is increasingly true globally, is this idea that as an industry, we've always competed and collaborated. So yes, we might not be writing it in London, but the businesses in London are maybe writing it in Bermuda, or they're writing this different business in the US market. They have many feet in many different places, and people move their capital around depending on where they think it'll work best for them. And so I don't think sometimes it moving out of London is necessarily a bad thing for the businesses.
The worry would be if the intellectual property wasn't in London.
Yes.
If that was draining away.
Yes. I think that's much more a worry for us.
Another, perhaps a little fly in the ointment, has been European business as a share of London's business falling a little bit. Anything behind that? Obviously, there's an obvious word that I think every British person listening would be very tired of because
Yes.
of BR. But is it anything to do with that?
It's all to do with that. You see it as stepping down through the last sets of data as people realised that they were going to write that business from their European entity. And it refers exactly back to my last point, which is that's not business that's been lost to ABC Insurance Company. They're just now writing it in their Luxembourg business, not in their London business.
Yeah.
So it's not a loss to the industry. It's obviously still being written. It's just being written on a different bit of the group.
One way of describing London is the ultimate surplus market. Obviously, we don't like to say it's the market of last resort, but it is. And obviously, a lot of the work going on in London is to make it more of a first choice market rather than a last choice market. But it is a market for large risk, for difficult to place risk, big limit risk, difficult peril, difficult occupation type risk. We've had a hard market globally, and that has favoured London. Do you think as the market eventually softens and stabilises and then almost certainly softens as it tends to do you think that will then disfavour London and we will start to lose market share again?
You see that business will go back to the domestic markets as their appetite, as their ability to underwrite that, as their balance sheet allows. So the key for London, and a good story doesn't ever change, is we have to be the people to whom people are always bringing the new risks, the difficult risks, the hard to place risks, as you've just said. It's always that difficult thing. The market of last resort always sounds a bit desperate. I always think it's the market of first choice for the difficult to place risks.
Well, yes, there is. Or no one's ever done this before, so it should be by default London.
We've shown we can do it with cyber. I think we're doing really interesting work on a lot of the net zero transition. You see a lot of businesses offering really either interesting new solutions or sort of old solutions for new problems. You know, intellectual property cover is as important if you're inventing the next blue hydrogen as it was if you were inventing the first motor car.
And you want to get finance and you want to be sure that that intellectual property is worth something.
Exactly. And then you want to get the thing built. You know, all of that requires the market to cover it. So we need to keep thinking about innovation and we need to be on that front foot so that as products mature and they re-domesticate, we're still thinking about what's new. That's
next?
Where our growth is coming from. And that, I think, as I say, an old story remains true. That was the story that Steve Hearn told 10 years ago. It's just as true today.
Yes, certainly you get a feeling that obviously we're only a few yards away from the Lloyd's lab, and that's a permanent process that's actually being exported around the world to different Lloyd's offices. Certainly, I don't get a sense that anyone's resting on their laurels, whereas, I don't know, previous hard markets, it would be sort of, go away, I don't want to innovate, I'm too busy shoveling money into a big bucket over here.
You might say that, Mark, I couldn't possibly comment.
That would be the way I would describe it. Sort of like, we haven't got time for innovation, we're too busy making money, go away. But the two seems to be going, we're having an absolute golden era for a very good set of results and hopefully baked in the next couple of years. But at the same time, no one seems to be resting on their laurels, which is the most encouraging thing. So obviously we're seeing digitalization, we're seeing lots of innovation. going on all around us. So it does seem to bode rather well. And to your point about the green finance, we had Kita on the show, which is, again, looking at ensuring carbon credits, and CFC also put up a similar product on that. So those bode very well because obviously those are potentially touted as the next cyber.
Absolutely. And I think when you go around the market and you talk to people, there's a lot of people either trying to deconstruct process. A lot of that's done through the Lloyd's lab. How can we do it better? How can we take out pinch points and innovate? How can we improve it? And how can we think about what these new risks are, whether it's carbon credits or whatever son of carbon credits is going to be? I think, again, 5 years ago, would you really have seen people with job titles as head of innovation in London market insurance businesses? I don't think you would have done. And now you look around and there's a whole community of people who that's their job title. And that's their job. It's the old Frank Field, think the unthinkable.
I suppose, yes. And if it's your job, you better come up with some.
Exactly. What are you doing all day? There's not a bit of innovation going on there.
Absolutely. Sort of, if you name it, you can measure it and you can make it happen sometimes. Yeah. It's just actually identifying it as a way of making it happen. And perhaps that's a similar point to make. Perhaps the whole overriding theme of the LMG is identifying a lot of things and helping make things happen on the back of that. The other big one is personnel, human resources. In fact, the last time that we met was actually also in the Lloyd's lab, and any regular listener will remember the fun episode I did with 3 teenagers.
Yes, Startup Sherpas.
And that's because of you. You helped back that, actually. It was that Startup Sherpas had an outreach specialist going out and meeting teenagers, and a long way from London, and a long way from what we would traditionally associate with London market intake. And that was fascinating. So thank you for instigating that, because it was really, really interesting. I've never done anything like that before.
I know. And they were so confident and so coherent and so smart. I mean, I just thought, God, I still haven't achieved that, let alone could have achieved at the age of 15, 16, however old they were.
Yes, so the report card on that, obviously, in the report, there's a section on gender diversity and on ethnic diversity as well. Really interesting. And also we've got an age. It looks like there's an age kind of bulge problem. It looks like there's progress being made as well, though. So what's your report card on that?
There is improvement. Last year I was saying there were more people over 50 than under 30. Now it's at least the same. So we're narrowing the gap, not by a huge amount, but it is moving in the right direction. And the numbers on gender and ethnicity are improving, albeit from a low base. And some of that's about the collection of the data, which will improve, and therefore the numbers will improve. So I think we are making progress, but I don't think anyone feels there's any room for complacency, and we've all got to try harder and do more. And we are supporting things like Startup Sherpas, which is, as you see, does a great outreach into sort of teenagers. It's all done digitally. How they do it is amazing. And then obviously we've got our schools program, and then other people are doing other things. We need everyone to be doing everything. This isn't about one or the other. We need one plus another, plus another, plus another to keep building momentum, because the really annoying thing is that kids grow up. So, next year there's a whole load of new 17-year-olds who haven't heard of specialty insurance either. But last year we took 100 sixth formers into the market for 2 weeks. This year we've increased it. We're doing 150. So come back in the first week of July and see the market knee-deep in 17-year-olds. And we want to do more. And the market's been incredibly supportive. But this is our secret sauce as a market. We collaborate and we compete. And this area of collaboration around talent, I think it could be incredibly powerful as a way of really moving the needle. Rather than us all trying to do it one firm at a time, we come together. That's what we do all day. We pool capital to take bigger risks. So let's pool our energies on talent so that we can influence more people.
Pool the human capital.
Absolutely.
Much as possible.
Very often, much better said than I could have put
it. I saw some encouraging numbers, certainly on that intake, the intake of new young people on ethnicity was very, very good. It seems that we're below average as a market, but that new cohort is coming in at above average. So that hopefully, as it works through, hopefully by 30 years' time, that will be normal.
When I engage with young people in the market and we do events and so forth, I look around the room and I feel really confident about the future of the market. You do see a much better gender split. You see much better, could be improved in terms of ethnic minorities. But you also see this really confident, articulate, smart set of young people. And you think, God, if this is the future of the London market, I think we're going to be okay.
Well, is there anything more to add? What else are you up to?
You mean in my spare time?
You're going to have, I suppose having an election campaign is quite good, because then the government goes into, what do they call it? Purdah. It's a bit.
Yes. So I have to say that has cleared the next 6 weeks of my diary quite neatly from quite a lot of things that we were doing with the government and Parliament. So the really big thing for us will be our July work experience programme. That's coming up very shortly. There are 50 market firms, 150 students, about 300 market volunteers. So it's a bit like three-dimensional chess. We're still thinking about what else we can do on talent. We will keep pushing on captives. Everything is on ice, but that doesn't mean we can't keep the debate going and keep talking to the regulators. And obviously, once the next government is in place, we'll be picking up with them. And I think thinking about what will we want to do when the new government comes in, where will we start on both assumptions of whoever it might be.
Solvency UK, I presume, would be the big thing.
Well, it's not huge for us. It's much more for the ABI side of the house, because obviously that's got big implications for them.
So that's the Association of British Insurers, which obviously has all the big life and pensions insurers in there.
Yeah, so it's much more of their initiative than it is for ours. I mean, for us, we think it would enable the PRA to do some useful reporting reductions, which we think would be good. So yeah, we won't be idling away the next 6 weeks. We'll be planning, Mark, for what comes after that.
Do you think on some of those metrics, will we have a sort of feet to the fire report?
I think the regulators are required under the Act to do their first report to Parliament on how they will be implementing the new growth and competitiveness objective 1 year after the Act came into law. So I think that's September of this year. So that will be interesting. I am assuming that Treasury have been gathering the metrics that they have asked for. Not sure they're necessarily obliged to publish them. I think they still have a call-in power when they can ask the regulators to report on one initiative or another. The House of Lords, as you know, instituted a new Financial Services Regulators Committee. So they've been doing, well, they were until yesterday, an investigation into how the regulators were implementing the new secondary objective. So they've definitely got their eye on what's going on. They've only had 2 witnesses, I think. Obviously, they'll be put on ice too.
Lots going on. So there will be something on there that we'll be able to
People are looking at
something.
it very carefully. Enough people believe that this is really important, and it's not good enough just to have the words. Actions speak louder than words.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. We'll be looking forward to reporting on all your actions until we meet again.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for your time, Mark.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this programme. These really help get the word out. Before we go, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry.
The Voice of Insurance is produced in association with Advantage Go. Release your underwriters to underwrite with Advantage Go's underwriting platform. Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.